All right, more on phylogeny. So, as I said, with phylogeny, we're looking at how closely related organisms are, or rather, species are evolutionarily based on shared traits and kind of how recently they shared a common ancestor. So, how do we figure this out? Before we were able to sequence DNA, we mostly did this based on shared traits. So, like, how many traits do these species have in common? And the fossil record, because we could look at fossils and be like, okay, this one kind of turned into this one, it turned into this one, turned into this one, turned into this one. Okay, and then we got this, and like we can kind of almost trace it back to a common ancestor. Sometimes, of course, fossil record, you have what you have, Although we're always finding new ones, which is exciting. But now, since we can sequence DNA, we can actually look at what percentage of the DNA between different species is identical. So if you think back to the example of this being like a family tree, right? So you and your sibling, again, more recent common ancestor, your parents, right? So you guys are going to have more DNA that's identical than you and your cousin. Because again, your cousin, the common ancestors, the grandparents, right? So that is a much further back common ancestor. So you and your cousin, lot of DNA in common, but there's less that is identical than you and your sibling. You and your sibling would share a higher amount of DNA than you and your cousin. So that's kind of what we do, but again, for whole species. So for example, if we were like, okay, are cats more closely related to like bobcats or to lynxes? We can look at, how much of their DNA is the same. So we might say like, okay, cats share like 99% of their DNA with bobcats, but only 98% with lynxes. So they're more closely related to lynxes. So that's a more quantitative numerical way of measuring how closely related species are. That's not perfect, but it's a pretty accurate way of figuring out who's more closely related to who. All right, so we use phylogeny to arrange and organize our species into groupings. And the groupings go from very, very broad to very, very specific. There's a reason the words species and specific have like sound the same. It's the same root because the species is the most specific grouping. So, for example, let's talk about domains. So, domains are the most broad grouping. They contain tons. Each domain has a bajillion species in it. So, for example, us humans, we are in the domain Eukarya. Eukarya is a domain for all of the organisms that have this certain type of cell called eukaryotic cells that are larger and slightly more complex. So, by contrast, you have domain Eukarya that has all multicellular organisms. So, any organism that has more than one cell, it's going to be in domain Eukarya. And it actually contains a few single-celled organisms as well. The other two domains are bacteria, so like all bacteria go in another domain, and archaea. Archaea are also single-celled organisms, and they're kind of like bacteria, but they're also very different, which is why they're in their own domain. So so you have eukarya, has all multicellular, so plants, fungi, animals, some single-celled algae, seaweeds, all of them go into domain eukarya. So that is the biggest, broadest grouping, contains like a ridiculous number of species. Then we get to kingdoms. So, for example, us, and we are in kingdom Animalia. So, kingdom Animalia is all the animals, right? So now it's still a pretty big grouping, right? All animals are in kingdom Animalia. But now we're not talking about plants. We're not talking about fungi. Plants are in kingdom Plantae. Fungi are in kingdom fungi. Sorry. Yeah, fungi. So now we're no longer, so we've gotten a little bit more specific. And from there it goes phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So that's going to get from the most broad to the most specific. There's a few different ways of remembering the order of these. There's a lot of mnemonic devices. The one I've heard most commonly is kings play chess on fine green squares. So KPCOFGS. So again, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. But there's a lot of them out there. So if you find one you like better, you can definitely use that one. So let's look at humans again as an example. So kingdom Animalia, right? Big old grouping of all animals together. It's going to include lobsters. It's going to include starfish. It's going to include bison. It's going to include the chimpanzees and the sea turtle and the bird and the humans, right? All these belong in kingdom Animalia. But it doesn't include plants and fungi. Now, when you go down to the next grouping, we are in the phylum Chordata. These are basically the vertebrates. Technically, it also includes a few invertebrates, but we'll talk about that later when we get into our invertebrate species. So, phylum Chordata, those are for animals that have a spinal cord, which is like what's in the center of our spine or spinal column or vertebral column. That's around our spinal cord, big old cluster of nerves that goes down our back. So this would not include things like lobsters and sea stars because they don't have a spinal cord. So got a little more specific. Then we are in the class Mammalia, right? The mammals. So those are things that have hair and give live birth and produce milk, right? So that would not include like the birds and the reptiles. It wouldn't include the eagle. It wouldn't include the sea turtle. Then we're in the order primates. So those are animals that have 5 fingers and opposable thumbs and things like that. Then we are in the family Hominidae. So that would not include lemurs and monkeys. Then we are in the genus Homo. And while currently we are the only member of the genus Homo, so the genus of Homo only has one species in it. If you went back a couple 10,000 years, there actually would be several other member species in the genus Homo, but they've all gone extinct. So we are currently the only species in the genus Homo. But our genus is Homo, and our species is Sapiens. So we are Homo sapiens. Um, so when we list a species, we do it by their genus and their species. The genus is always capitalized, the species is always lowercase, and then it's italicized. That's how you like present a uh, scientific species. But how do we decide when a group of animals is a species, right? So there's been a lot of talk and decision and going back and forth on how do we decide how to group things. We need things to be organized. There's actually quite a few different definitions of what a species actually is. For this class, we're going to use what's called the biological species concept, which is basically that a species is a group of individuals that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So they can have babies, and then those babies are able to have babies. So that's why, for example, dogs are all considered one species, because all dogs, at least hypothetically, can breed with each other and have puppies, and then those puppies can have puppies. Um, so that's why even though dogs can look really, really different from each other, we still consider them all to be one species. Now, on the other hand, horses and donkeys can breed. They can have a baby that is a mule. So a mule is the offspring of a horse and a donkey. But the mule is actually infertile, and that actually has to do with the like number of chromosomes and how they split when sperm and eggs are created. But basically, a mule cannot have its own kids, so that line can't continue, right? The horse, the donkey, and baby, but then it stops. So they are considered different species because they cannot produce fertile offspring. So a horse is one species and a donkey is a different species because when they have babies, they're not fertile. And of course, many species just can't reproduce at all. Like, a fish and a bird can't even make any kind of baby at all, right? So they're just for sure different species. Now, of course, there are gray areas here. Like, for example, a dog and a wolf can actually produce fertile offspring, but we still consider them separate species because basically it almost never happens. And we consider that hybrid to be basically something that wouldn't really ever persist in the wild. Basically, because wolf packs will not accept a wolf dog. They're like, no, that thing is creepy, basically. And so, like, wolf packs won't accept a wolf dog, so wolf dogs don't like survive in the wild. But you can make them. But so that's why so again, there are gray areas here, and in most of biology, there's often gray areas, but we try to make up some rules so we can talk about things in a certain way. So again, for the purposes of our class, a species, a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. And the way we write it is capitalized genus and then lowercase species. So for humans, it would be Homo sapiens. So that's about it for the content this week. I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys in lab. Don't forget to bring a 3-ring binder so you can take your lab manual with you and it's not just a chunk of loose papers. Don't forget to do the getting to know you discussion. And then the other assignment you'll need to do this week, sorry, 2 other things you'll need to do this week. The seeing ourselves in marine biology assignment. Hopefully that one will be pretty fun. And then also the syllabus quiz. The syllabus quiz is kind of how I'm quote unquote taking attendance for lecture. So please make sure you get that done by Friday. With that, I hope you guys all have a wonderful first week. I'll see you on Friday, and we'll continue onwards. Of course, email me if you have any questions about anything, and looking forward to meet you guys. All right, bye bye.